Hello, and welcome to ITPro Live. 5 days of fantastic and informative sessions on a wide range of topics that are designed to help you navigate business and technology challenges both now and in the future. I'm Maggie Holland, Group Editor and Editorial Director of the B2B sites at Dennis Publishing. That's Channel Pro, Cloud Pro, IT Pro, and the Business Briefing. And I'll be your host for the start of each day, as well as moderating some of the sessions. Thank you so much for joining me in what promises to be a great event. Each day, we will major on a particular theme, with keynotes, real-world Q&As, panel sessions to help inform and inspire you. Day one, today, the focus is on the virtual enterprise. Day two will focus on modern cloud for modern business. Day three will focus on security and the evolving threat landscape. Day four will focus on innovation versus keeping the lights on. And day five will focus on how you can build a solid foundation for future success. Enough from me though. It is my pleasure to announce our first keynote speaker for our first session on our first day of our first ITPro Live event, Paul Chapman, Global CIO of Box. Thank you so much for Paul for joining me.
Thank you, appreciate it, thank you. Good morning from the west coast of the United States, where the sun is not quite up yet. So good afternoon to the folks that are joining us virtually from Europe today. Big thank you to ITPro for having me here today, and looks like what was an outline of an awesome agenda for the rest of this week with some great content. Certainly hope to be able to join as much of that as possible. I'm certainly happy to be here today as we talk a little bit about navigating the new future of work and sharing some perspectives on what we've learned over the last few months, having talked to literally hundreds of technology professionals, been involved in webinars and leadership discussions as we navigate through the business is unusual. Today is really all about you as leaders, as we figure out together what the new future of work looks like and what does business is unusual or back to businesses is the new normal looks like. We all know these are unprecedented times in the world today as we come to grips with really this new reality. Remote work is suddenly an overnight requirement with few organizations feeling really well prepared. It's like we've been forced into the world's largest work from home experiment. And so far, it's not been easy for a lot of organizations. And there's certainly a lot of things that we're learning as we navigate here. So just a short summary to start with. As I mentioned, over the past few months, I've had hundreds of technology leader conversations. And from their feedback, there are a number of themes and trends that have really emerged. One of those is, of course, the accelerated digital agenda across multiple industries. Organizations that may have been investing at a certain pace in their digital agenda are now accelerating their pace of investment in order to be more resilient to the current situation of mass remote work. We're also seeing a lot of major projects are being either paused or canceled. So these are sort of the projects that were significant in size, sort of ERP upgrades, implementations of large enterprise systems or services are either being paused or canceled as the time for major change or major disruption in your technology landscape is not conducive to taking on at this particular point in time. The general theme of remote workforce is here to stay, and what does that look like? We don't actually know what back to normal looks like at this point. We just know it's very complex, but there's a high degree of confidence that remote workforce is here to stay in some form. And cloud migration efforts are moving into hyperdrive as organizations really reimagine from what was traditionally sort of business continuity into business resiliency. What does business resiliency look like for organizations? How can we remain resilient on an ongoing basis, especially as we prepare ourselves for potentially this type of disruption to come in waves and not be just one and done? And also every business process is now a target for automation. We're seeing companies really focus in on more machine learning and digital labor as you look to introduce more and more automation into business processes, especially now that we're working in a much more of a remote environment. So we started Box back in 2005 with a mission to power how the world works. From day one, our ethos has always been, and guiding principle has always been, that our services don't discriminate between one location and another. We've always had in our ethos work from anywhere, anytime, any place. And we believe that work is not a place you go to, although these days it seems it is. But it's actually a state of mind and not a place that you go to. And never has there been a time when that mission has been more important than right now. Box is used by tens of millions of users, 100,000 businesses around the world globally. And so today our mission is even more important today than it ever was previously. With the shift to remote work, COVID-19 has become the new champion of accelerating digital agenda. If you would have told me a few months ago that the new champion of change would have been COVID-19, I would have thought you were relatively crazy, but that's really the world we're living in today. I often say the slowest rate of change we'll ever experience is the one we're experiencing right now. I've used this many times in the past and probably couldn't be more so true than the current times. Today our business models, our daily operations, our technology architectures, and even the culture of our companies are being really disrupted simultaneously, making for a very complex set of changes as we transition here. Interestingly, at Box, our data scientist team has been studying sort of the patterns of change in work just since the shift to work remote or work from home is occurred. This has really been very interesting to see this shift. You'll see here, this is a chart from around the March-April timeframe, where as we watched sort of everything unfold, we saw our customer base start to shift their primary work location to a remote location. And you can see, based on cities, we can actually base it on cities as well, and based on countries and regions, you'll start to see this shift to remote work as it happened by country. Italy, of course, as we know, that was hit hard very early on. You can see the shift there. Spain, United Kingdom following there, Germany, United States, and so on. And so it's very interesting when you have this amount of data. At Box, we ingest somewhere in the region of about 30 to 40,000 files a second, handling billions and billions of API calls on a monthly basis. And so we're able to see these patterns as they emerge in the way that people are shifting the way that they work. Not only is where work is changing being done, but so is when. We're starting to see a flattening of the workday. You'll see this chart here represents a flattening of the curve between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. We're seeing people start their workday earlier, finish their workday later. But it's softening in the middle. I think without the grind of daily commutes, people are able to start their days faster and earlier, and have the flexibility to end their days later as they choose. And I think the flexible working day has really helped a lot of people, especially with the additional stress that people are taking on working in a different environment, potentially working alone in an isolated environment, or working with other sort of family stress that might be happening. This chart actually shows a softening of the workday actually towards the middle, where we see people maybe working a little less before lunch and maybe a little less after lunch. But it's definitely changing the way that people are working, and the work-life balance is definitely started to shift. From a Box perspective, as we look at industries, collaboration has never been more important. We've seen somewhere in the region of about 40 to 60% increase across most industries in the usage of our own platform. I think that if you look at this as an example, as you can imagine, we saw a significant increase in the usage of local government agencies, education, healthcare, telemedicine. Organizations are collaborating more and more than they ever were previously. And I'll touch in just a moment on how we're seeing a significant increase in all communication exchange services that allow organizations to stay connected when working remote. We're also seeing a significant increase in integrations as well. At Box, we've always been a big believer in the best of breed services. And as I noted, all platforms that support any form of conversation exchange are seeing just a dramatic increase. Internally at Box, we've seen our Zoom integration usage go up by more than 500%. We've seen partner integrations with other services such as Zoom, Slack, Apple, just significantly go up. We're in the region of around 2 million meeting minutes a month now, just at Box. So we're seeing organizations turn on and leverage best of breed integrations, giving them access to the best services that are available to them without disrupting their user experience, while at the same time managing all of their most valuable unstructured content on the Box platform. Keeping information secure, though, is more complex than ever. When we look at the complexity that we're dealing with, when we look at the different types of users, employees, partners, customers, bad actors with malicious intent, employees that may be doing things that are negligent in your environment without even knowing that they're doing some things that are creating risk for you. The plethora of apps that we're working with, I think it's on average now close to 100 SaaS apps most organizations have, but we still have old traditional tools like email and so on. Devices, we're dealing with managed devices, unmanaged devices, and content architectures are very, very fragmented. One of the things we focused on at Box, which is something that we've always focused on, but we've now focused on accelerating new additional feature rollouts and so on, is in order to support secure remote work. So we've brought forward and accelerated a number of features, including all new device management capabilities, malware detection, automated controls to prevent spread, a refreshed user experience, preview enhancements for additional file types, and deepen some of our integrations with other services as well. Unfortunately, responding to a crisis does not mean security threats or compliance risks are any less pervasive. In fact, we've seen a significant uptick in COVID-19 malware attacks using bogus news articles, malicious emails, fake real-time COVID-19 update maps, and so on. This is a representation of an increase in the amount of inbound blocked emails that we're blocking at Box. And in talking to other technology leaders, their experience has also been quite similar as well, where they have seen a significant amount of inbound email that needs to be blocked because of suspicious or some form of malicious content. This is another reason why we've seen the increase in services like Proofpoint and MX Hero. These services can be turned on very, very quickly and require very little to no change management, but they're helping organizations to think through their security architecture and how to protect. As organizations, as I mentioned earlier, shift to accelerated digital transformation, accelerating the projects around the digital agenda, I've heard of things like speed over perfection, but the thing that's really key here is speed over perfection may be okay, as long as the caveat is you don't ignore security and risk. These two things have to be tightly integrated together. So there's lots of ways to accelerate the digital agenda as long as you've thought through what your security architecture looks like at the same time. We spend a lot of time with companies thinking through that. Organizations are recognizing as well that there are a lot of benefits from working from home. I think we now have more resilient technology to be able to use, and some cultures are more tuned to this. However, we do anticipate a higher percentage of employees will be shifting to permanent remote work or some hybrid thereof. What the hybrid looks like at this point, I'm not sure. This is a Gartner survey that was recently done. Although based on a number of the interactions that I've been having personally and a lot of the conversations that I've been involved in, saying that 10% will remain remote seems like a relatively low number. I've talked to some companies that have started the re-entry process in different regions around the world, and where they've left it passive and up to the workforce to choose whether they come back in or not. These are excluding things like where you may be on a manufacturing floor or working in labs. When left passive at this point, we haven't seen more than 10% actually, return back to the office environment. And as I mentioned before, reentry is much more complex, and sort of why rush again when, after we've successfully transitioned in the most part. And, given the current patchwork of government advisories and stay-at-home orders, most organizations, do believe that re-entry will be very gradual. I think we should also prepare ourselves for a more discerning workforce that will expect continuous and credible assurances that they are working in a safe environment. And we've already seen a fair amount of this as organizations start to somewhat open back up. So if we look at sort of the before and after, I think previously there was still the notion of 9 to 5 office-based work with some remote work. Today, organizations are shifting their technology architecture to be much more agile, work from anywhere, much more resilient than previously. Asynchronous work previously versus working in real time. We've seen a significant increase in all forms of communication exchange, as I noted earlier, whether that's in team chat. We've seen 30 to 50% ourselves. And I know other organizations are seeing that, whether that's Slack or Microsoft Teams. We're seeing significant usage in video, whether that's Zoom or WebEx or Teams again. Collaboration services, I mentioned what we've seen at Box as well, significant increase in the adoption of our platform. And of course, manual and paper-based processes are on hyperdrive to be, to move to digital and automated workflows. And I'll touch on sort of some of the examples that we're seeing there in just a moment. Monolithic tools to a best-of-breed modern reference architecture integrated with your best-of-breed services, giving people access to the innovation that's out there today to help support organizations work in a much sort of modern, born in the cloud, growing up digital experience. And protecting the perimeter versus protecting the flow of the data. The complexities of shifting to a modern reference architecture with best-of-breed services is really thinking through how you protect the flow of data. And certainly we're spending a lot of time talking to customers and potential customers about how you think through your risk posture and security architecture to protect the flow of data. And as I touched on previously, business continuity planning is shifting much more to business resiliency. Business continuity planning being more so of a plan you define, and test, maybe tabletop test once a year or maybe twice a year, and fingers crossed you never need to execute on it. However, with business resiliency, it's much more around how do we operate in an ongoing basis in a model that is resilient to massive disruption. And the other thing is without an effective therapy or vaccine, the next 18 months or more could see rolling shutdowns happening on a frequent basis. And how do we make sure that the next time this happens, it's not an event, but it is sort of business as normal or business as unusual, but at least it doesn't become a significant event for individual or for companies as they may shift back to a full remote workforce. So the companies that adapt best to these changes are those that will survive and thrive in this new world. Companies must adapt. We're seeing this already. I think there were a lot of companies that may have been nervous that they'd not grown up in what you would call a work from home or work from anywhere style. Some groups were more adapt to transition than others. We like to say you can speed up some things, but you cannot speed up the culture of your organization. And so that's really challenging organizations because a comfortable pace of transition, unfortunately, is now forced into something that really just is really days and weeks and maybe months. And especially with the acceleration and the rollout of maybe new technologies to support new ways of working, as we roll out quickly, understanding the culture and change management aspects of rolling out any new types of capabilities are really important. In fact, technology at the end of the day is the enabler, but it isn't what changes the outcome. It's an enabler to a different outcome, but the way companies operate, the way they think and behave, and the culture of the organization is really what drives the change. So today we really must be fundamentally rethinking our company's culture, our technology processes and business models. At Box, we like to say it's not about rewriting your software, it's really about rewriting your company. So today our business models, our operations, our technology architectures, and as I touched on earlier, and even our company's cultures are all being disrupted simultaneously. Organizations have to move to a digital first way of working and operating. It's the only way to really be resilient going forward, and it's the right way to serve your customers and partners in how you're going to operate, and internally as well. At Box, we have a focus we always have on taking the work out of work, and how do we create frictionless digital experiences for our own employees, and that extends out to our partners, suppliers, and customers as well. So it's very important to take an architecture-led approach for the future, and understanding what the future of work looks like. As I touched on earlier, companies are now adopting best-of-breed cloud services at an unprecedented pace. And again, when you have close to, on average, I've seen many companies with many more, over 100 cloud-based apps. How you think through the architecture and the integrations, leveraging the best of breed services without disrupting user experiences is really, really important. So productivity can get very fragmented. Content architectures can get very fragmented, which by itself then creates risk to your organization if you don't think this through as you accelerate your digital agenda. So this is a great opportunity. I've spoken to a lot of technology leaders about this. It's an opportunity to stand tall, have the courage to push for investments in accelerating, your digital agendas, your digital architecture. They like to say, no crisis should go unwasted. So this is no different than that. Example, simple things like, no more wet signatures. Say goodbye to paper-based processes. Like we see in a lot of industries today, that have maybe not invested at a certain pace. I've heard of organizations where as employees go home, they're spending their time printing paper, putting things in envelopes, putting stamps in mailing, and looking for, there's nothing less sort of anti-social distancing than actually going around and asking somebody for a wet signature. I actually just had one this weekend, where somebody sent me a piece of paper to actually sign physically, put back in an envelope, and then sign back, which I found just to be just so very archaic, and you just won't be able to get work done in the future if you continue that way. Interestingly, you think about an example like DocuSign, that recently just replaced United Airlines on the NASDAQ 100. You look at the sort of growth that they have seen in the last few months, especially as organizations move to e-signature capabilities. Zoom went from 10 million daily participants to over 300 million daily participants in meetings. Any form of communication exchange. We've seen a 75% increase, as I mentioned previously, in chat services at Slack and so on, 200% increase in our Zoom meetings. So really, organizations are really accelerating their digital agendas, and we're seeing that just play out at an accelerated pace. As I mentioned, technology leaders have an incredible opportunity to lead the way in building a strategy and technology architecture for the new way of working. I think it's an opportunity for us to learn new technologies that are allowing organizations to be productive when remote. We're doing number of proof of concepts and testing ourselves with services like Miro, Otter AI for transcriptions of real-time transcriptions of meeting dialogues, software that allows teams to collaborate, to do virtual whiteboards, to do Scrum meetings, to do engineering designs, things like that. We're starting to see an emergence of technologies there that are looking very promising to help organizations really replicate and emulate that sort of in-person, in-office experience. It's all about taking sort of some of that shallow IT and going much deeper, and continually looking for opportunities to automate. I think the more and more that we can automate standard repeatable tasks, workflows, sort of mundane activities, I like to say that any action that takes a human being less than a second to think about could be automated. Doesn't mean it has been automated, but could be automated. So again, I think as technology leaders, we have a tremendous opportunity here to really stand tall, get the investments that we need, or accelerate the investments that we need to execute on our digital agendas for our organizations. And I think, lastly, I'll say as I wrap up, leading with empathy must be our number one priority. I think focusing on the human element here is extremely important. We need to make sure that our collective number one priority is making sure our employees are feeling safe and their families are well and feeling safe and taken care of. Should be our first order principle. The work will take care of itself, but definitely as we look at our employees, it's very key to be socially connected while we may be physically distant from each other, and making sure that we have open and intentional communication with our teams is extremely important, and to make sure that our teams are well taken care of as we work through what is a lot of stress in our environment today, and a lot of change that's going on in the world around us. So with that, I'll pause and thank you again for your time this morning and allowing me to share some perspectives on what we're learning around business as unusual.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. What a wonderful keynote. I'd agree with you that we've all been collectively involved in the world's most kind of the biggest work from home experiment ever. So it's really great to hear from your perspective as to what happens next and how businesses can navigate some of those challenges. So thank you so much again for your time and your insight.
Pleasure. Thank you.